What's going on, guys? My name is Cody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about whether or not it's a good investment to either buy a short-term rental property or a long-term investment property. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Cody. I'm a real estate agent and investor here in Tampa, Florida. I was previously an ICU nurse until I ended up getting into real estate full-time. So for those of you who are watching this and maybe you're considering getting into real estate investing and you're working a full-time job, I'm here to let you know that it is extremely possible. I did this also while I was working as a nurse. It is very feasible. You can always hire property managers if you don't want to manage properties yourself. So my portfolio consists of 5 properties, in which I have 5 Airbnbs here in Tampa, Florida. I also manage 3 other properties for clients of mine. So I manage a total of 8 Airbnbs currently. I've been doing this for almost 5 years now. But with that being said, let's dive into it and let's talk about the pros of owning a long-term rental property. Now, the good thing is with a long-term property, you get one single tenant in there, typically for a 12-month lease. Whatever you guys decide on rent, that's the rent. That's what's going to be paid to you each month at the beginning of the month. Now, one of the other pros about having a long-term rental is you don't have to worry about furnishing the property. Unlike Airbnb, when you're setting it up, the property has to be completely furnished. Furniture, all the essentials in the kitchen to be able to cook, pots and pans, etc. So with a long-term rental, that's one of the nice things that you don't have to worry about. Now, another good thing about a long-term rental is you only have one tenant in that property. You don't have a constant turnover with guests coming in and out. And if you do your research right, having a good tenant makes it a lot easier to own a long-term rental property. Now, one of the other pros that I want to point out with owning a long-term rental is you have consistent income. Like I said, you're deciding on a set price that you want to rent that property out. And each month you know that you're getting that amount paid in rent. Now let's go ahead and jump into the pros of short-term rentals such as Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a short-term rental is, it's when you list for your property on a platform such as Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, and several other websites for guests to stay anywhere from one night to several months at a time. Now, for me, this is one of my favorite ways for renting out my properties. And I feel like there's a lot more pros on short-term rentals versus pros on long-term rentals. So one of the big things with short-term rentals is you're going to be getting a lot higher income on that property. Now, for instance, one of the properties that I own here close to downtown Tampa, if I were to rent this out long-term, I'd probably get anywhere between $2,000 to $2,300 a month versus having it on Airbnb. I'm able to see anywhere from $3,500 to $4,500 a month. Now, of course, there are other fees that are associated with this. There's cleaning fees, there's management fees, which fortunately for me, I manage my own property, so I'm able to capture that money. I don't have to go pay a management company. But as you can see, for me, it makes more sense to rent that property as a short-term rental versus having it as a long-term rental. So if you're in a destination where there's a lot of people who are coming for vacations or work-related reasons who are there for short stays, it might make more sense for you to rent that property out as a short-term rental. Now, one of the other cool things about having a property as a short-term rental is if somebody's not staying there, you get to use that property. So if it's, for instance, not in a location where you actually live, you can go travel, you can stay at that place when it's not booked. If it's somewhere near a lake, near the ocean, or other attractions that you like to go visit, that's a great opportunity for you to both make money and be able to stay at a place and not have to pay. Now, in my circumstances, my Airbnbs are all pretty close to where I live, so I don't really get to go and stay at these properties. But when I do have a lot of family coming down, I get to block nights off and allow them to stay at one of my properties versus having to go spend money at a hotel or another Airbnb. So one of the other pros about having a short-term rental property is there's not just one tenant staying there. You have constant guests coming in and out. You don't ever have to worry about evicting somebody. I've never personally had to kick anyone out. I never have to worry about getting paid or chasing someone down for money, because anytime somebody checks in, 24 hours afterwards, I'm getting paid regardless. So there's no stress about getting paid, such as having a long-term rental where I've had circumstances where I have to go chase my money down, get my rent. Sometimes it's just such a headache to do that. Versus Airbnb, you're always going to get paid regardless of what happens. And with that being said, it's also a good thing to have that constant turnover because it gives an opportunity for these cleaners to get in that property every 3, 4, or 5 days, check everything out, get everything clean completely and ready for the next guest. Versus having a long-term property, you don't necessarily know the condition that they're keeping that property in, what they're doing in there. So I personally also enjoy having short-term rentals and being able to see what's going on with the property, making sure it's clean. So really what it's like having a short-term rental is running a hotel business. So every time somebody's checking out, you're cleaning the property, you're making sure nothing's broken. And that leads me to another thing. A lot of people worry about, well, what if I have these guests that are staying? What if they break something? What if they destroy the place? Which I've had this happen to me several times. It's not the end of the world because Airbnb and these other platforms stand behind their host. They want to make their host happy. So what you do in these circumstances, when someone breaks something, it's reported to you by one of your cleaners or you notice it yourself. You either request the money from the guest for those repairs, and if they don't make those repairs, then you escalate it to Airbnb, in which Airbnb gets involved. They'll get things resolved, and they'll make sure that you get paid, and the property can get repaired and ready for the next guest. So like I said, a lot of people worry about that, guests coming in and out, but really it's nothing you have to worry about. You're covered with these companies who you're listing your short-term rental property on. So it's a great thing. I personally love short-term rentals. Like I said, I've only had several issues. So one was actually pretty bad. I'm gonna put that link for that video down in the description. You guys can check that out. And with this circumstance, they did cause a lot of damage, but I had that property repaired in just 3 days, and there were no issues after that. Now, let's go ahead and jump into the cons of long-term versus short-term rentals. Starting with long-term is evictions. Now, with somebody who's staying at one of your rental properties long-term, they have a 12-month lease. If they don't pay or they're breaking terms of their lease, you have to go through the eviction process. And depending on which state you're in, that can be a headache. It can take time. You end up losing money. Another thing, if this is a property that you want to stay at and it's a long-term lease, well, you can't just kick these people out just because you want to stay there. You want to have family or relatives come stay in that property. And the last thing about long-term rentals is you're not going to make as much money. And now that leads me to a side note. When you're looking at purchasing whether a short-term rental property or a long-term rental property, you do want to run your numbers properly. You want to make sure if it doesn't work out as a short-term rental, what's it going to do for you as a long-term rental? Is it at least going to break even? Is it going to cash flow? Ask for advice for somebody who's done it before. Shoot me a comment down below. Shoot me a message. I'll give you any advice that I have on it. But that's just a side note for you guys. Now let's go ahead and jump into the cons of an Airbnb. So the first con about running an Airbnb or short-term rental, I know I've probably used them both together. I personally pretty much only use Airbnb, so I say that a lot. But if I do say that, I just mean short-term rental. But the first con of that being that it is a hotel business. It takes management. Either you're going to pay 15 to 20% to manage the property, or you're going to be the one to manage it yourself. Sometimes that can take a lot of time out of your day. So depending on your career, your job, do you have the time to talk to guests, coordinate turnovers and cleaners to come in, coordinate any repairs? That all depends on what circumstance you're in. So that's something that you need to consider. And the other thing, when you're setting up an Airbnb, you have to furnish the property. Now, not only does this take money, but this takes time, picking out all the right furniture, having all the right designs, making sure that people are going to click through these photos and want to book that property. But I know a lot of people don't personally like setting up furniture, going to buy the furniture. It can get a little bit expensive when you're furnishing it, and this is something that you don't have to worry about when you're renting out as a long-term rental. And also that furniture over time is going to get wear and tear, so there's going to be things that you have to replace, such as tables or couches or chairs. So that's going to be other expenses that come up along the way and things you're going to have to deal with. The last con about having a short-term rental, this depends on which state and which city you're in. There are several cities and states that do not allow short-term rentals at all. So this is something that you want to do your research on. You don't want to get in trouble and have your short-term rental business shut down and all that hard work and time and money that you put into furnishing the house all go down the drain. So make sure you do your research, study the area, find out all the rules and regulations before you get started if you decide to get into short-term rentals. So now that we've gone over the pros and cons, how do you decide what you want to do? Well, this all comes down to your personal preference, what location you're in. Again, you want to check out those rules and regulations. You need to do your research on the location that you want to have a short-term rental in if you're deciding to go down that route versus if you just want to have a long-term rental. Another thing you need to consider when deciding is what's your ROI going to be? Are you going to be making just a few hundred extra bucks to deal with the hassle of running a short-term rental business? Or are you going to be making thousands of dollars? Because if it's just a few hundred bucks, in my opinion, I'd probably just rather go down the long-term rental route. But again, you need to do your research, find out what other places are booking for. What I personally like to do is get on Airbnb as a guest, go to the area or location that I'm thinking about investing in or putting a short-term rental on, and I'll go click on other people's properties, see what they're charging per night, see if they're staying booked. That's just a little tip for you guys to decide, okay, how much money do I think this property will make versus should I just rent it out long term? And another thing for you guys to consider is if you guys are looking to invest in multiple short-term rental properties, probably want to start out in one location. You don't really want to be too scattered out. I like to keep all my properties within 5 to 10 minutes of each other. Reason being because I have a cleaning team here. They can go from one property to the other property very quick. I can go lay eyes on these properties fairly quick. And also have a team of contractors. I have a team of handymen, lawn care services. So having everything centralized in one location makes it much easier versus if you're scattered out and you're hours and hours away or in another state, you have to figure out how you're going to build a team in those different locations, and it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to get started out and manage. So I hope this video helped you guys out with making a decision on whether you want to go the long-term route or the short-term route. If you guys found value, please do me a favor and like and subscribe. If any of you guys watching this video have a short-term rental, shoot a comment down below. Let me know which market you're in. Let me know why you chose that market, how it's doing. And if you're completely new to Airbnb and you're wanting to get started with hosting your first property, I'm going to include a link down in the description, which is going to give you $40 for hosting your first guest. And as always, if you guys have any questions at all, shoot me a comment down below. I'll be answering all my comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.